Today, this morning, I'm sharing one of the most difficult ethical issues I have encountered this past year. It is so complex that other than simply going numbly silent, I honestly don't know how to react and how I feel about this. We all remember that day, Saturday morning of October 27 in 2018, exactly 5 years ago, when to our sheer horror, we heard that a man had broken into the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh with an automatic weapon, opened fire, killing 11 innocent congregants, just like ourselves, critically wounding 2 others and injuring 5 responding police officers. Last month, on Wednesday, August the 2nd, after 2 months of trial, a federal jury in Pittsburgh unanimously recommended that this evil, racist murderer, Robert D. Bowers from Pennsylvania, be sentenced to death. On the one hand, I felt a profound sense of relief. Justice has been served, and the agonizing trial of this vile person is now done. He was found guilty on all counts and will be punished for his horrific crime. On the other hand, upon hearing that he would be given the death penalty, I also felt a sense of unease and anxiety, as I personally, as Rabbi Mika, I oppose capital punishment anytime and everywhere. The Torah teaches that there are multiple crimes for which we can impose the death penalty, from violating the Sabbath to disobeying one's parents to adultery, murder, and so on and so forth. Deuteronomy 19, verse 21 even teaches life for life, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, hand for a hand, foot for foot. And yet, while the texts instructing us how to impose the death penalty are abundant in our Torah, unfortunately, Jewish tradition actually does not support the death penalty any longer. And that is because Judaism has evolved over the centuries. Many of our ancient rituals or ideologies, like animal sacrifice, the permission to stone to death a disobeying wife or a child, owning slaves, or even banishing an ailing person from the communal camp to deal alone with their disease, have all been changed to reflect a currently more civilized way of life in this day and age. In other words, our Talmudic rabbis effectively abolished capital punishment, primarily because human justice systems are far from being perfect, and executing wrongly convicted individuals is, simply put, unacceptable. The death penalty, according to our Jewish tradition, should be left in the hands of God, so to speak, as was written in the Talmud in Sanhedrin 37. You can check me later. Centuries later, Maimonides proclaimed in Sefer HaMitzvot that it is better to acquit 1,000 guilty persons than to put a single innocent person to death. Considering the inevitable margin of error in any justice system, Maimonides eliminated the death penalty altogether. Even in the 75 years history of the State of Israel, only one person has ever been executed by a court of law. I'm sure you remember that name, horrific name, Adolf Eichmann, the architect of Hitler's final solution. And even that sentence was hotly debated within the courts and around the kitchen tables of every citizen in our homeland. As I mentioned, I consider capital punishment a quick fix. It may make some of us feel good, or politicians look good as they get tough on crime. But I believe that ultimately it lessens our own humanity when we take the life of another person, no matter how evil their action may have been. Those who have committed atrocities need to be punished. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. Upon committing the worst crime, taking another's life, they cannot be a part of civilized society ever again. But I firmly believe that one of the prices of being civilized, if you will, is taking on their responsibility to act in a way that is consistent with our own internal sense of holiness, as is appropriate today in our sanctuary. Yes, there is evil in the world. There are predators and murderers among us who deserve to be separated and cut off from civilization. For some, there cannot be any rehabilitation. And as much as I would like, we will never be able to completely eliminate this type of evil from our world. Yet at the same time, we must remember that as a sacred community, we will not allow ourselves to bend down to these awful people, to their level. We should not become murderers as well as a society. But then, my entire philosophy and way of thinking was challenged and has come back to haunt me with a vengeance. When I read in the media that some family members of the slain people of Tree of Life were grateful and relieved that justice was served with that capital punishment, I tried to put myself in their shoes. Honestly, I don't know where to take this from here. It hit too close to home this time. This got me to question my own theology. Thank you, God, I'm not a survivor of murdered family members, and I'm just going to really knock on every wood around me here. I'm not a survivor of murdered family members. Do I have the right to speak up and publicly deny these broken people of the relief they so deserve? I'm pretty sure they're each painfully aware that justice served will not bring their loved ones back. Or do I keep my mouth shut and simply hold space for these grieving people, as Aaron, one of our ancestors, Moses' brother, did in Leviticus 10, upon learning that both his sons died in fire? While Moses immediately explains their death by reflecting on God's intentions, the text tells us, Vayidom Aharon, which translates to, and Aaron was simply silent. Sometimes silence is the only response. Anything else would diminish the horror of the experience. As Aaron knew, some things are beyond words, beyond reason, beyond our ability to contain or understand this meaning. So, what do I do when the phrase Vayidom Aharon from Leviticus 10 seems to get louder and louder in my own head right now? While researching this topic, I read an article what Rose Scheinerman, a public defender and a firm opponent of the death penalty from Philadelphia. She works with many capital cases. She has been working throughout her career with capital cases. This is what she wrote in response to the question she was asked once. How would you feel, Mrs. Scheinerman? How would you feel if your own son was murdered and the accused was found guilty? Wouldn't you want him hanged? Her reply completely resonated with me. She said, I hate to even think about that possibility. And yes, I probably would want him to die. And this is why it is so important to have clear laws prohibiting the death penalty, because these decisions should be rational, not emotional. I thank God every day that the laws of our country were designed to approach painful issues and decisions with a clear head. Well, most of the time. The death penalty is immoral. It does not bring healing, nor is it preventative for future such murder cases. That has been proven over and over again. I quoted Attorney Scheinerman's response because it resonates with my own ideology. And yet, if I were the rabbi of Tree of Life, this traumatized congregation, traumatized beyond words, how could I possibly look into the eyes of those family members who found comfort, even temporarily, in sending the assailant to his death and tell them, how could I possibly tell them that the death penalty is immoral? Even worse, that their temporary relief is immoral. That is my conundrum on this Yom Kippur morning. I am so torn right now about this issue. And since this is Yom Kippur, I thought that I'd bring this topic here for us to ponder and chew on. We do have quite a few more hours during our congregant hour and our afternoon evening services. How do you feel about capital punishment? If you oppose capital punishment, what would you say to someone whose son, daughter, parent, or grandparent was murdered? Do you think it's ever right for one person or an establishment or even a country to take the life of another human, as awful as they may be? And lastly, God forbid, if something like this happened in our congregation, would it be appropriate for me as a rabbi who loves life and opposes capital punishment to even bring this up for discussion? I think that for me, the only option available right now is Vaidom Aharon, to be silent, like our forefather Aaron was in the face of both his sons being slain. Yom Tov.